Yo, everybody. Welcome back to Campus Chronicles, the official college football show, the show where we cover all things college football here on the Spalding Media Network. We're back. We are back. After a week absence, we return to cover the Big Ten this week and another conference with a lot of new teams. If I'm not mistaken, 4 new teams added into the Big Ten this season. It was from 12 to that's
From
not right. It went
14 to
from
18.
14 to 18. So few new teams as the Big
Mostly on
Ten
the West
expands
Coast.
out to the West Coast.
Yeah.
Here in this conference, they took most of the Pac-12 schools. Although I will say, I think the Big Ten took majority of the Big 12 took a majority of the Pac-12 schools
Yeah.
and brought them over
Big
to
Ten
their
got the
conference.
quality, it feels like.
What's up?
Big Ten got the quality Pac-12 teams for the most
Yes,
part.
and then the Big 12 kind of got the rejects, if you will.
Yeah.
Uh,
Although we don't want to
so
call them that because we haven't got to our Big 12 episode yet, and I might have a Pac-12 team, win in the Big 12.
yes, I agree. Um, so regardless of that, we're going to go through our 18 through our number one crew here, if you will, and we will be going through each team, predicting how they will do. I used playoff predictors to predict my 18 different teams. I think, Chris, you kind of did the same thing a little bit.
Yep.
But we obviously will talk some in-depth analysis here of these teams. Some teams, obviously, schedule-wise, have a bit of a easier road, if you will, to get to a Big 12 or Big 10 championship or potentially even the college football playoffs. Some teams are going to have a little bit of a harder time, I think, than others. So with that being said, Chris, let's begin with number 18. Our worst team going to our best team. I have 2 teams that are tied with the same record.
Me as well.
But one of them has a better conference record. So that is why they're at the bottom of this list. So I guess I'll begin with my number 18 team. I have Northwestern at 2-10. It's going to be a rough season for Northwestern. For one, stadium-wise, they are going to be playing on a practice facility, basically a makeshift kind of temporary stadium that they're going to be having. That I believe is, I don't think it's on campus, but I do think it's near campus in some capacity. But the views are going to be really cool. It's right on the water, right down the river. It's almost going to kind of be like the Army Black Knights Stadium, where they're kind of like right on the river, except it's not going to have the size or the prestige that stadium has, which, I mean, Army Stadium doesn't have a ton of prestige either. But it's still going to be pretty cool with the views. But I do think Northwestern as a team is not the top upper echelon. Big Ten schools are going to get beat up a lot this year. They're kind of not really in a spot of being competitive at this point. I think at Northwestern, I have them going 2-10 this season. Yeah. They probably win their non-con games. And I think they even have a non-con game that's pretty tough as well against Duke that I actually have them losing to Duke.
I have them winning that game, but I do have them losing to
I see. I have them losing to Duke. I'll be honest. In my NCAA Road to Glory, we lost to the Miami of Ohio and Duke. So maybe that will happen in real life. I doubt it, but nevertheless, I do have Northwestern as my number 18. Who is your number 18?
Yeah. I do want to touch. You did mention schedule, right? So I think there's no more divisions in the Big Ten anymore. So you don't have the 3 powerhouse Big Ten schools all on one division. So the schedules are going to be different this year, right? You're going to have every single team that you could possibly play. So if you have a schedule like Rutgers, for example, where you can avoid the Ohio States, the Penn States, the Oregons of the world, right? That's going to be good. Northwestern, they kind of have that. I mean, they play Iowa, but you have Ohio State, Michigan Otherwise, every other game is kind of, up in the air. I do think your 2-10 is probably a bit too low. They're projected their over unders 5.5 this year. ESPN thinks they're in contention to go to a bowl game. 5.5, whatever. 2 is very, very low.
But it could still happen, though.
Yeah, I agree with you on Northwestern. I have Northwestern tied with my 18th team, so we're kind of in that same boat. So we'll kind of just talk about Northwestern for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Like they gained assets in the transfer portal, but they're still running off that Pat Fitzgerald situation. Off of a 1-11 year where they only won the game in what was it, Germany? Was it Ireland? They beat Nebraska, and then that was it. So they're still bad for sure. I don't think they're going to challenge for a bowl game. I'm in the same boat as you. 2 wins kind of feels harsh. I have them at 3, but I have Minnesota also at 3 wins. So I have Minnesota in 18th, but they're the same record as Northwestern. So kind of like you, we can split, 17th, 18th. To me, Minnesota, they don't have a pass game, and if you can't pass the ball in the Big Ten, the big time defenses, it's not going to be good. Their best player missed 6 games last year, their running back. So if they can't run the ball, they can't pass the ball. All they're going to have is an okay defense. And to me, you win 3 games like that.
See, I'm a little bit higher on Minnesota. I'm not too far off. I do think that they are a team that can be, I think that if they can get things together, they can be competitive. I do not think they will be bowl eligible, so that will just become kind of like my little spoiler there. We'll get to them in a little bit, but I do think they will come close, in my opinion. I don't know. Minnesota has always been a team that has been relatively well coached, so we'll see how they do. My number 17 is going to be UCLA. UCLA has always been a program that's kind of been hit or miss. They've either had really good seasons or they've been really bad. Last year was not a good season for them. And I don't think it's going to be any easier this year. The Big Ten is a lot tougher than the Pac-12. I have them also going 2-10, although I do have them winning a conference game. My gut feeling says that UCLA will have a struggling year this year in the Big Ten in their first year.
If they're
it's just tough for recruiting. They just don't recruit the same as some of the other programs.
Yeah, you go to USC if you want to play in Southern California. But
yeah,
I kind of agree with you a little bit, but I don't have them that low. That seems very, very low. They do have a hard schedule, yes. I don't know if you saw their head coach, his press conference with Deshaun Foster.
He had no idea about it.
He's like, we play in LA. The other team that plays in LA is USC. So yeah, maybe they're not going to be coached great this year. But they also have Eric Bieniemy running the offense. So I don't necessarily.
I don't know. They could be good. I just don't think they're going to be a bowl eligible team.
Okay, but
I also think the schedule is tough. They play
it's very tough
schedule, so the guys are going to
very tough.
And UCLA, their program. Their roster right now is not top tier.
They lost a lot of guys. Like I said, I'm not super far off on you with UCLA. I don't have them that low, but we'll discuss UCLA a bit more when we get to my, when we get there. 17 for me is Northwestern at 3-9. So we both feel very similar on Northwestern. I just don't think they have a lot of talent. They're still, going off the Fitzgerald situation, as I mentioned. I have them beating Miami I have them losing to Miami of Ohio. I have them beating Duke, Eastern Illinois, and Indiana. That's it. They lose every other game. So 0-5 on the road for them, 1-8 in the conference. Not a good year for Northwestern. We both feel the same. All right, let's go to 16.
Yeah. 16 for me. I got Michigan State at 4-8. I think this is also another kind of reasonable position for them. They're a team that kind of is still in limbo, right? They come off of a year where there was a lot of controversy. It was either last year or the year before that. They still, I think, just don't have a direction. They haven't been good in a few years. There's really they're kind of that brother to Michigan, where Michigan's been kind of the team to beat, and Michigan State's just kind of been the team that people forget about. People forget Michigan State was a good program for many years in the early 2010s through about 2015, 2016. Things started kind of spiraling once Michigan really got good. And then obviously the last 2 years with everything going on with the whole coach scandal, I just don't think it's going to be another good year for Michigan. They're still going to be trying to find their kind of identity, I think. So I think 4-8's respectable. Grab a few wins, basically win their non-con games, and maybe grab a Big Ten win against one of the lower end schools. But I think 4-8's probably about right where you would probably put them. They're a 5-win team, 6-win team at tops. They're definitely a bowl eligible team at tops, I think.
Yeah, and I agree too because I have them at 16th at 4-8. Maybe we can go through the games we predicted different.
Yeah.
One thing, there's a lot of change in Michigan State, right? New head coach, new offensive coordinator, but Aiden Chillis comes in, and I don't know if you've seen his stats pop up on your NCAA dynasty. He's a good quarterback. He's a 4-star quarterback. He's from Oregon State last year. Well, not last year, but he's from Oregon State. DJ Ugle was at Oregon State last year, but he's a good quarterback, right? But their defense was absolutely terrible last year. They didn't really improve on that. And they have a brand new head coach and a new coordinator. So that could be good things, right? We've seen teams get new coaching staffs and they could be good. We've also seen, like my Jaguars, we've seen new coaches come and go, and you don't have that happen. I think that could happen in Michigan State. I have them beating FAU. I have Maryland beating them. Yep. I have them beating Prairie View. I have Boston College with their 6-foot quarterback, Tom Castellanos, the long-lost brother of Nick Castellanos. I got, then I have them losing every game besides Indiana. You'll notice I'm picking on Indiana quite a bit, but I have Michigan State worse than Indiana. So, yeah.
See, I have Indiana beating Michigan State, but I also have Michigan State beating Purdue at home and Michigan State against Rutgers at the end of the season. Because by then, I think where I was looking at is also where teams were in the standings. Will we see changes? Like maybe Michigan State goes to like a backup quarterback and he plays well, or maybe they.
I don't think they're not going to get. They have a 4-star Aiden Chillis. They're not getting rid of.
No, I know they won't, but you just don't know. You don't know what's going to happen by the end of the season. But I do think Michigan State 4 wins is about right. We basically had the same wins, pretty much, except the Indiana game. You gave them the win there, so. Again, they're going to be a team that
I think Rutgers are a good team this year.
They're going to be a team that are probably not. They'll be competitive in a few games, but
they're very upset worthy. I think you look at Michigan State, you say, Michigan State versus UCLA, Michigan State versus Nebraska, whoever.
Yeah.
They're not going to lose by more than like 20. Like they're especially at home, they're going to have. Like they're not just going to. You don't pen them in for a loss on your schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Like. They can win and upset games. I have them going 4-3 at home, so 0-5 on the road though, which was very similar to Northwestern.
Yeah. So my number 15 is going to be this is my first bowl eligible team, although they are lower because of their conference
All
record.
right, so you got more bowl eligible teams.
I got Maryland at 15.
Ooh.
I have them at 6-6, 3-6 in the conference. I have them starting out really, really strong. I have them winning against UConn, Michigan State, Virginia, and Villanova. They win their first 4. They lose their first game to Indiana.
Yeah, me too.
Then they have them winning against Northwestern. I also have them upsetting USC at home.
I'm high on USC this year, so I won't say anything.
I'm high on USC, but I feel like there's going to be an upset. I felt like Maryland may be able to find a way. That long trip out to Maryland to I don't know where they play at in Maryland exactly, but then I have them losing their last 5 games to Minnesota, Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, and then obviously Penn State at home for them. That's a tough slate. The Minnesota game could go either way, but that's kind of where I have them at. I think 6-6 is about where they're at. They're definitely, I think they could be higher up. I don't see that being an issue there, but this is where I have Maryland. I think the back half of their schedule is definitely going to be much more of a grind. They definitely have an easier part over their schedule. And I think, honestly, 5-1 to begin the schedule is actually potentially possible.
And I think that's what's actually expected, at least looking at their over-unders. They are expected to start the year 4-0, as mentioned. So you start the year 4-0, you just, you have a good chance of making a bowl game. You just have to get a couple.
And they could beat Rutgers. They could be a 7-win team, I think.
They could beat Iowa because, Iowa don't have an offense.
They could beat Minnesota, obviously, as I mentioned. They can be an 8-win team. I just think there are going to be some losses as we get later in the year. There's always games like those. Games against these type of teams can be a little tricky sometimes. So,
yeah, I like looking at bye weeks too. Like You do play Minnesota right before your bye week heading to Oregon. So, maybe there's just
I like their bye weeks. I like
emphasis
the way
on
it's
that.
set up. It's very sectioned. Like you got 5 games to start the year, but none of them are against like
they got a
major
5-3-4
schools.
going on.
Yeah. So I like their way their schedule's put up. So who's your number 15?
Well, I also have Maryland at 6-6, but I got them a bit higher on my list because I have a few more teams that aren't bowl eligible.
So we got the same record, but just kind of different.
I have the Chicken Nuggets getting 15th here. If you don't know who the Chicken Nuggets are, I don't know. How do you not know who the Chicken Nuggets are? We're talking about Purdue, obviously. Purdue Boilermakers. The Chicken Nuggets, they're 4-8. Let me talk to you about Purdue, right? Their head coach is on the thinnest of ice, right? He has not performed. And then, so you mix in a head coach that's on thin ice. You bring in a quarterback in Hudson Card, who I don't think is that great. Like, he doesn't put up numbers. He really isn't that, he's not a quarterback that wins you games. So, you mix that together. You mix together the fact that you're in a rebuild. One other thing that I mentioned about Purdue is that they are very, very bad against the pass rush, or against the pass, sorry. So that automatically had me, making them lose games against teams that had at least a decent offense. If you can't defend the pass, you're giving up 400 yards passing a game as Purdue, you're not going to win much. So I have them losing a lot of those games. I have them beating Indiana State. I have them beating Nebraska just because of the matchup, really. But, games like Illinois, I have Illinois winning. I have Michigan State beating Purdue. I have Indiana beating Purdue. They're going to lose a lot of those, in my opinion. They just don't have what's necessary. And this is, Purdue were good back in the day. Like, not even that long ago, they were a good team. And I just don't see it anymore. 4-8. ESPN has them at 4 wins as well. 30% chance to make a bowl game. Kind of feel the same way. I think the ceiling here is 5 wins. So, they do play a lot of those mid teams, so they could have that, change. But like I said, I don't like the coaching staff. I don't like the pass defense. So I got them at 4-8 and 15th, not bowl eligible.
Yeah, I think that's about. I mean, that definitely could happen. I think their high is probably going to be bowl eligible, and that's probably where I think they'll be at if they do make a bowl game. So I agree with that. Purdue
do a tough schedule. You play Notre Dame, Oregon State, Wisconsin, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State.
They should beat Oregon State. They should beat Oregon State, though.
I don't. Oregon State's a good team. They're on the cusp of getting ranked.
We'll see. I don't know. We'll see.
That's in Oregon State. They're not winning that. I think Oregon State's probably gonna be like 20-point favorites for that game.
Yeah, we'll see.
So that's 6 losses right there.
Well, I have Nebraska at 6-6 as my number 14 team. I know you're very high in Nebraska this year, but I definitely think that with Matt Rule and their team, I do think it's going to be baby steps for them, but I do think they're going to make a lot of progress, and I do think they'll be a very competitive team this year. There's going to be a lot of games that they'll probably win, or be at least in contention to win, I should say. I do have them winning their first 3 games. I think they beat UTEP, obviously. They beat Northern Iowa. They beat Colorado at home. They get revenge on Colorado. I do think Colorado's a lot less likely to get on that roll that they had like last year early in the season. I have them losing to Illinois. Actually, I have them losing to our Purdue Boilermakers early in the season. I also have them losing to Rutgers, Indiana, and Ohio State. Indiana at home, that's kind of tough. Ohio State is going to be a challenging one. But I do have them winning their last 3 out of their last 4. I have them beating UCLA. I have them beating Wisconsin. I have them beating Iowa. They get hot late. So
I do have them beating Iowa as well, yeah.
I also do think they're going to lose to USC.
I just feel like you just don't understand Nebraska like I do. Now, look, I'm not a Nebraska fan. I like Colorado, right? These are rivals, but you just don't understand Nebraska, right? Let me tell you this.
Okay.
Matt Rule turned Baylor around in how long? 2 years, right? Matt Rule's a fantastic coach, right? Nebraska had the 19th best defense last year. So you're already starting in a good spot. They had no offense, but they bring in the highest rated quarterback, Dylan Raiola. He is Patrick Mahomes 2.0, literally. He's the number 1 quarterback. He's rated 99 on all the recruiting. They have a super easy schedule. They start 5 out of their 6 games at home. They're favored in most of their games this year. You mix a good defense, an energetic offense, and a great college head coach. I'm not saying Matt Rule was great in the NFL. He wasn't. He's a great college coach, right? Baylor was kind of in the same situation Nebraska was in when he took it over, and Baylor was like the 7th best team after the end of the second year. So I'm not saying Nebraska are that great. There's no way they're only winning 6 games this year, especially with that schedule.
Well, that's where I have them. That's where I think they finish. So
I'm willing. We're going to throw it out here, right? You have Nebraska at 6-6. I have them winning more than 6 games. When the season is over, we're going to look back at this and we're going to play this clip when Nebraska are 8-4.
Okay.
But,
you're number 14.
My number 14 team is Indiana. So I feel like the bookies and such, they're a bit harsh on Indiana. They have Indiana as the worst team in the Big Ten.
I don't have that. I think they're better than that.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's what ESPN has them. That's what 24/7 has them. They have them as the
I have them as a top 10 team.
Well, I have them 14. So I think for Indiana, right, they struggled last year. They're 3-9, but they brought in a ton of transfers. Curtis Rourke at quarterback is interesting, right? He was from Ohio. He played for the Bobcats last year. He was good. Also, I don't know if you knew this about Indiana. They're basically James Madison. They took their head coach and they brought 13 James Madison players in the offseason. So this is kind of James Madison in the Big Ten, which is really interesting, and maybe that's why you had them a bit higher. I have them at 5-7. I think that's respectable. They win a lot of those middle-of-the-road games, but I don't have them beating, Michigan, Washington. I have them beating Nebraska, though, but, they're not going to beat Ohio State. So 5-7, I could see 6-6. I think we both agree that the consensus is a bit too low on Indiana. Mm-hmm. They're not the worst.
Yeah, I mean, they have a schedule that they can easily get through. I mean, it's not that difficult. They have a few non-con games that are not that hard. They have a few Big Ten matchups that aren't going to be difficult. I think they lose to the teams that they lose. So I have them higher. I think that they could actually do some damage if they get on a bit of a roll, especially early in the year. I do think they'll lose to the teams they should lose to, though.
But I think the James Madison thing is interesting because it's effectively James Madison, this team.
Yeah.
You bring their head coach, you bring 13 players, maybe 6 or 7 of them are going to start. It's very much like what happened to Colorado last year. Like Colorado had a brand new team.
But they had they had like 30 guys. So
but 13 guys just from James Madison. It's interesting. Can they do that at Indiana? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see, man. It's going to be interesting. My number 13 is the 5-7 Minnesota Golden Gophers that you had mentioned. We're too high on. I'm also not very high on them. Obviously, you had them at like 3 wins on the season.
3-9.
So I have them at 5-7. So I'm not too far off. We're kind of almost in that ballpark. I think 5 wins is about where they'll probably be at. I'd imagine that's probably about their over-under as well. As you mentioned, Minnesota is just kind of an average team. They're not going to do much this year. I have them beating Rhode Island and Nevada. I have them also beating Iowa early in the season. I do think.
Okay, let me ask you about that. How are they going to beat Iowa when they can't pass for more than 200 yards against the best defense?
I don't know, but it's at home, so I'm going to say that right now.
And Minnesota beat Iowa at home last year.
You just don't know. You don't know. So I have Minnesota beating Iowa at home early in the year. But then they start really getting a reality check. I have them losing to Minnesota or to Michigan, excuse me. I'm losing to USC. I actually have them losing to UCLA. That's one of the UCLA losses.
That's one of those travel games I mentioned. You're going all the way to LA.
Losing to Maryland, or I have them beating Maryland, excuse me. I have them beating Illinois. And then I have them losing to Rutgers, Penn State, and Wisconsin at the end.
So we're fairly – do you have them beating North Carolina?
I have them losing to North Carolina.
Okay, so we just went different on Iowa and Illinois in that sense. Yeah. So we are fairly similar. Like I said, there's no way they beat Iowa with their terrible pass. And then Illinois and Minnesota was a coin flip for me. I could see that going. I could see 4 wins for Minnesota, 5 maybe, definitely not 6.
So that's where I have them at. I have them at 13. So who is your number 13 team here heading into?
My number 13 is the team I just mentioned, Illinois, the Fighting Illini. They're going to be really close to make. They are the final team that doesn't make a bowl game. So I have 12 teams making a bowl game. They're 5-7, but I could definitely see it. They just have a brutal schedule. Right? They play Penn State, they play Michigan, they play Oregon, they play Kansas. That's 4 losses right there. Then I have them kind of winning all the other games. They beat Central Michigan. They beat Eastern Illinois. I have them losing to Purdue. I have them beating Minnesota, beating Michigan State. But the Fighting Illini, like they're middle of the road. Like they're not super good on offense or super good on defense. They're also not bad. It kind of feels like Illinois is going to be one of those teams that you're like, okay, well they could win that game, or oh, I wouldn't be surprised if they lose. Their O line is pretty solid, but nothing screams like, oh, Illinois is going to win this game. Like it's just going to come down to how they're playing that day. So I have them at 5-7. I would not be surprised if they go 6-6 at all. ESPN has them as the third worst team in the Big Ten. I did not agree with that. I think it's a bit too harsh. They have them at 5.3 wins. I got them at 5-7. So I guess we do feel similar there, at least. But yeah, they're 13th for me.
All right, yeah, I like that. My number 12 is going to be Rutgers, the Scarlet Knights, a team that I think could make a run towards the top of the Big Ten. But I do think that their schedule is a little bit challenging. It's kind of a up and down roller coaster season I have kind of for them, like where they're winning a few games here, losing a few games here. I have them beating Howard and beating Akron at the beginning of the year. Obviously, those are easy. They go on an early bye week, week 3, but then they got a really rough slate after that. You get Virginia Tech on the road. I think that's a loss. That's a tough place to play at VTech. They're going to get beat up, I think, a little bit there. Washington, even though that's at home, yeah, Washington, I still think gets the job done, even on a short week, too. That's games on a Friday night. I have them beating Nebraska. I do think Wisconsin beats Rutgers. UCLA loses to Rutgers. And then USC on the road, New Jersey to Los Angeles. Ugh, that's rough.
Yeah,
give me USC, especially on a Friday night.
Friday night.
Yeah, that's a short week. I do have a meeting Minnesota and Maryland, but I do think they lose to Illinois, and then I do think Michigan State maybe gets on a little bit of a roll late in the season. I do have them losing to Michigan State at the end of the year, but 6-6 gets them into the bowl game. I do think 6-6 is probably like maybe the middle, like kind of for where Rutgers will be. They could be a bottom tier team, but they also could be up towards the top. Just depends on how each team does and where they're at. But I do think it's going to they're not really going to have any consistency this year, I feel like, in terms of the way their games are going to play out. I do think they're a good team. I like Rutgers, though.
But you said they have a challenging schedule. Is that what you said?
I mean, the schedule is not that
They
easy.
have the easiest schedule in the Big Ten.
Well, it's not that
They
easy.
avoid Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. They actually have the highest chance of making a bowl game, besides the big teams in the
well, I mean, they still play Illinois. Illinois is going to be good.
Yeah, but I'm saying they're in an 80% chance. The next highest team at 80% or higher is Michigan. So they have the 5th highest odds it's because of how easy their schedule is. It's the easiest schedule in the Big Ten. I do have a bit higher. We'll talk about that more. But I like Rutgers for sure. I just don't know where you're getting the challenging schedule from. It's the easiest schedule in the Big Ten.
It's up and down though. It's not really.
But the Big Ten's very good. They avoid the top 4 teams.
Okay, well that's great, but they could still lose to some of those teams
for sure. But it is the easiest schedule in the Big Ten.
Well, that's great.
Yeah. So 12 is Maryland. You had them at 6-6. I have them at 6-6. They're just 12th for me. It's a bit higher. I like Maryland quite a bit this year. Just like you had mentioned, they have an easier opening schedule. They don't have Mr. Tagovailoa, whatever his name is, the Tua Part 2. They don't have him anymore. So they are going to have to find that replacement at quarterback. That's really about it. They have a very solid foundation of a team. They have all the pieces. If they have great quarterback play, they can win 7 or 8, maybe 7. If they don't have good quarterback play, they could win 4. So I feel like it's kind of depend on that. So I have them winning 6 games this year. So we kind of have similar teams, sort of. You're very low on Nebraska and Rutgers compared to me, but I also have some teams you haven't mentioned yet. So let's get into 11 before I crack into the top 10 here.
Yeah, number 11, I have Illinois, the Illini at 6-6. I think this is not a bad spot for them. I do think that they have a pretty tough schedule. You got Oregon on the road on a Saturday. That'll be tough. Michigan at home, which is a positive. But I do think they go start the season 3-1. I have them losing to Kansas. Kansas is an interesting team. I think they find a way to get the job done against Illinois. Penn State on the road. That'll be tough. I'm losing there. So 3-2 in the first part of the season. They lose 7, 8, 9, and 10. Purdue, they lose. Michigan, they lose. Oregon, they lose. Minnesota, they lose. Those are my predictions there. But they do get back on a roll. They beat Michigan State, Rutgers, Northwestern. They go 3-0 to close the year, get bowl eligible. Illinois is an interesting team. I think they have a chance to be better than 6-6. But I do think, obviously, again, I do think they lose games in the middle of the season. They got a bit of a tough slate with Michigan and Oregon.
I just had them lower because they're bad against the pass. So any team that's gonna throw on you, you're gonna have a hard time defending.
Yeah.
But just make sure when you're doing your Big 12 predictions, make sure you have those teams winning. Like you had Nebraska beating Colorado. Make sure you don't pick Colorado beat Nebraska when we go to our Big 12 episode. Just making sure to throw that out there, because if that's the case, I don't want to see any differences when we go to record the episode. You got Colorado beating Nebraska. That wouldn't be good, now would it? It's also not good. UCLA. I've got them as my 11. You're very harsh. You're 2-10 UCLA. Okay, let me explain. Now, UCLA, yes, they aren't that great, but they're in LA. So every home game they have, for the most part, teams are going to have to travel. Now, look, Ethan Garbers is at quarterback. He's okay. He's good. He's fine. He's not the reason they'll win or lose games, right? I don't know what to believe in the coaching staff. Like I said, we talked about Deshaun Foster, but Eric Bieniemy is going to tie this offense together. They do have the 5th hardest schedule in the country. LSU, Oregon, Penn State, Iowa, USC, Washington. They have questions, everywhere. But to me, 2-10, that's outrageous. I have them beating Hawaii. I have them beating Indiana. I have them beating Minnesota. I have them beating Rutgers. I have them beating USC. I do think that's an upset. I have them beating USC, and then I have them beating Fresno State. But I will say, yeah, Hawaii's not an easy way to start the year. At least the travel's not too bad. You're the closest you can be, right? 2-10,
but it's still not easy. But
no, 2-10 is outrageous. Maybe 4, maybe 5. I have them at 6. ESPN gives them a 50% chance exactly to go 6-6. You will be wrong with that 2-10. And like I said, we're going to come back to that episode at the end of the year. Actually, we'll come back to that episode in week 4 when they have 3 wins. Actually, we probably won't even need to wait that long. But they're my number 11. So let's crack into the top 10. This is when we start getting to teams that are going to be in the good bowl games, maybe in contention for the playoff. Maybe not. I don't know. But who do you got at 10?
I have another team at 6-6, and then we get into kind of our top teams. Purdue at 6-6. I know you're not very high on Purdue. I do think that they do win a few games this year. They beat Indiana State, obviously. I have them beating Oregon State, in my opinion, and Nebraska and Illinois. They also beat Northwestern and Indiana. They lose to Michigan State. They lose to Penn State and Ohio State. They lose to Wisconsin and Oregon. And obviously they lose to Notre Dame. You mentioned it isn't an easy schedule. Obviously, I don't think they're not going to win games, but I do think it's going to be a bit of a grind. That Oregon State game is probably the big one. As you mentioned, the travel will be tough. But I do think that Purdue will win that game, in my opinion.
I don't know. I also don't believe in the coaching staff.
It's tough with Oregon State, though, because they're in a conference that doesn't exist, basically. So they're not
16-point favorites as we speak.
It depends on what they're fighting for. That's in the season. That's gonna be the big key.
It's on the CW network. 16-point favorites. Oregon State are at the moment. It's in Oregon State. I don't see any possible way Purdue, the Chicken Nuggets, win that game at all. But 10 is the time for me to throw it out there. 10th place at 7-5, Rutgers. So I know we disagreed a little bit. So they have the easiest schedule in the Big Ten, right? Their defense is pretty good. Their pass defense was top 20. They played well against the big teams. They are a run-heavy offense. That is another important thing to put here. They're run-heavy offense. They're going to control the tempo of games, and they have a Greek quarterback. Just want to throw that out there. So they are a team that's going to, not give up more than 25 a game. They're going to run the ball very good. Their running back, Kyle Monagai, is going to get drafted. So he is kind of, the guy that's going to decide how good this offense is. If, their quarterback, who's from Minnesota, the Greek Stallion, if he can continue to be better. They were 7, and here's something I want to point out to you, Dylan. They were 7-5 last year. They got better this year, and they have an easier schedule. So at minimum, they're going 7-5. That's where I have them.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can see that happening. I mean, they're definitely a team that's going to be competitive, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go 7-5 this year.
Okay, that's not what you were saying a few minutes ago, but okay.
I mean, they can be competitive.
You said they had a hard schedule.
They do.
Schedule. They have the easiest schedule in the Big Ten. And they got better, and they had a 7-5 record last year. All right.
They're going to be competitive. I said that they're 6-6. I haven't had.
Okay, but there's no way they're only 6-6. Okay, whatever.
You haven't been 7-5. You haven't won one extra game.
Yeah, that's at minimum.
Do.
They could easily be an 8-win team.
All right, whatever.
At minimum. So we definitely disagree on UCLA and Rutgers, or UCLA, Rutgers, and Nebraska so far. Things are getting spicy here in the Big Ten episode, guys. Who do you got at number 9? We're definitely getting.
I have Indiana at number 9. I have them going 8-4 this season. I have them winning their first 7 games, and then they lose the last handful. I have them beating FIU. I have them beating Western Illinois. I have them beating UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, Northwestern, and Nebraska. They actually don't have that difficult of a schedule.
I have them starting 3-4 in the first 7.
Really?
Yeah.
Who do you have them losing to?
Northwestern, Maryland, UCLA.
See, I think they're better than that. I think they have a better team than that.
Okay, explain why.
It's a JMU effect.
I guess.
I think they'll be better this year. I really do. I think they're 8-4. I think
Curtis Rourke's a good quarterback.
I think they're a bowl team. I think they're an 8-4 bowl team.
But Curtis Rourke goes from the MAC to Big Ten. I don't know if I like that.
He's gonna perform. He's gonna ball out this year.
Okay. Number 9, bit of a surprise. I thought I'd be higher on this team, but it does have to mostly do with the schedule. I'm picking a team that was just in the championship last year. Picking Washington at 7-5 for my number 9 team. So they have a new head coach. Obviously, Kalen DeBoer leaves. So for me, the biggest thing here is Washington lost almost everything, right? You lose Penix Jr. to the Falcons. You lose your head coach to Alabama. But you bring in Will Rogers from Ohio State. So I still think they're going to have a good quarterback. But they did lose a ton of production to the draft. They lost a ton of production to the transfer portal. But Will Rogers is a good quarterback. Had 93 touchdowns so far in his career. And he's going for his final year. They got new transfers on the defense. So I still think Washington are a good team. I wouldn't be surprised if they're ranked at all. Also, fun fact here, Steven Belichick is running the defense. The man from the Patriots himself. It's just, I feel like you lose your quarterback, you lose your head coach. I have them starting 5-0. I have them losing to Michigan. I have them losing to Iowa. I have them losing to USC. I have them losing to Penn State. I have them losing to Oregon. I think those are all games that they could, probably will lose. So 7-5, I could see 8-4. But Washington are still a respectable team. They're going to be a 7-5 Washington in my book is going to be higher than an 8-win ACC school. So I still like Washington. I do. 7-5 is the record. 4-5 in the conference. It's just a really tough schedule.
No, I agree. I agree with that. It is going to be a tough schedule for them. It will be. Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it plays out, man. I mean, they don't have an easy schedule, and I don't know. I mean, their team, they're not the worst team, but they're definitely going to have a. It's going to be.
They're coming off.
It's going to be a grind to win
college football championship.
Yeah,
they lost a lot.
So my next team, I guess what are we on? 9, 8.
We're on 8 now.
8 now. Jeez, we're getting right through this. Wisconsin is my number 8. 8-4. A team that I actually got to see last year in the ReliaQuest Bowl. Lost to LSU last year in the ReliaQuest Bowl. I have them winning 6 out of their first 7. I'm beating Purdue, Rutgers, Northwestern, Alabama. I have them winning.
Me too.
Yeah. We both agree on that. South Dakota, have them beating Western Michigan. They lose to USC, and then they, I believe they will lose 3 out of their last 5. They lose to Penn State, Iowa, and Nebraska. But I do think they will beat Oregon, and they beat Minnesota.
Yeah, I can see them beating Oregon. I picked Oregon, but Wisconsin.
They're going to be a competitive team.
Sure. Like I said, yeah, I have Wisconsin beating Alabama. I know we discussed that a week ago. But, my question is, I feel like you had Alabama beating Wisconsin when we did our SEC preview, but that is, things change, I guess, from one week to another. We both like Wisconsin. I have them 8-4 as well. But they're actually the next on my list. They're not the next team. The next team I have is Nebraska, and now we can discuss Nebraska fully. I know. We kind of already did discuss Nebraska. Like I said, I like Rule. I like Dylan Raiola. But he is a freshman. But he is like the highest rated quarterback heading into the Big Ten. And their defense is really good. I have them at 7 wins. Like I said, there's nothing really more to talk about with Nebraska. I feel like I gave you my Nebraska rant when you picked them so low in 14th. So let's move on.
They're 6-6 again. Like even though they're 14th, that doesn't mean that they're a bad team. That
just means you had them like losing tiebreakers against the teams higher up, or you had a lower conference record.
It's tiebreaker, but that doesn't make a difference.
They win more than 6 games. That's all I want to say.
Okay, well, great. You got them at 7 wins. I got them at 6 wins. It's not like we're far off from each other.
Oh, we are, though. We certainly are. Based on how
they're 6-6.
But this is the way you talked about Nebraska.
I don't think Nebraska is going to be bad. I think they'll be good.
You have them losing as many games as they win.
Okay, well, you have them winning 1 extra game.
I have them winning 2 more games than they lose.
If you were higher, you have them, 8-4?
No, I have them 7-5.
Okay, yeah, they win 1 extra game.
Yeah, but they win 2 more games than they lose. You have them losing the same amount of games as they're winning.
They still win 1 extra game.
Yeah, compared to you, but you're not understanding what I'm saying. I have them 2 full games over 500. You have them losing the same amount as they win.
They still win 1 extra game. It doesn't make a difference.
Don't care. Don't care. There's a big difference between. There's 2 numbers in between 7 and 5. There's no numbers in between.
Okay, but how else would that work? You can't win. You can be 8.
No, but I'm saying there's just a big. It's just a big difference. It's a big difference.
Whatever.
It's a big difference for sure. Especially 8-14. That's 6 spots ahead.
It's still 1 extra win you added.
It's a big win. It is going to be a big win, whoever it's against.
We're not that far off.
Okay, look. All right. You're just a Cornhusker hater.
Not a Cornhusker hater. I'm at 6-6.
There's an equal amount of chance they win as many as they lose for you. In my book, it's not the same. They win 2 more.
That is still.
Let's move on to your number 17. Who do you got?
Hold on. First off, I know it's not the same, but. You still only gave them 1 extra win. I'm not that far off of your prediction. And it only happened that they're 14th because of a tiebreaker.
But I'm saying 7-5 is like the minimum for me. Same with Rutgers. Like 7-5 is the minimum.
Okay, well, I think they're 6-6.
Such a hater. Barely making a bowl game.
I'm barely off by you. This is so stupid. He's no longer welcome on the show. He's no longer our coach.
All right, Mr. 2-10 UCLA.
Oh my
Who's your number
All
7?
right.
Who's your number
Number
7?
7, I have Washington at 8-4. I do think Washington will be competitive, not as competitive as last year. Obviously, a tougher conference.
8-4 though. Okay.
8-4. I have them winning their first 6, and then winning against Indiana and UCLA. Those are my other wins. They lose to Iowa on the road. They lose to USC on the road or at home.
Yep.
They lose to who else? They lose to? They lose to Oregon on the road, and
we have the same exact thing. I just have Michigan beating them.
I have Michigan losing to Washington,
which is that's why I'm 7-5, and that's why you're 8-4.
I have 6-1 at home, by the way.
5-2 at home. Yeah. The only difference here really is Michigan. I have Michigan beating Washington just because of how good Michigan's defense is. But we do feel similar on Washington. I kind of already broke down.
So you have them at 7 as well.
How do you feel about Will Howard taking over at quarterback? Is it that big of a loss from Penix Jr.?
I mean, I like Will Howard. He's good. He's a good quarterback. Coming over from Kansas State, if I'm not mistaken. So, I like it. Will Howard did a lot.
Great insight here by Dylan Spalding. If you're looking for insight, I'll give you insight for my number 7 team. That is going to be Wisconsin at 8-4. We're very
Will Howard isn't at Washington, by the way. He's at Ohio State.
I know. I told you that he's from Ohio State. You're the one that said Kansas State, and I kind of just let you type it in just to make sure.
Well, that's where he went to Kansas State prior to coming there.
Well, congratulations. Anyways, he is at Washington now. Wisconsin is number 7. We both.
Will Howard is not at Washington. What are you talking about?
Will Rogers. Oh,
you said Will Howard.
I apologize. Will Rogers. Same thing.
Will Howard is in Ohio State.
Yeah, he's at Will Rogers.
Okay, well then that
Great insight. Here's why I like Washington. Washington have a great offensive line. They have a great defensive line. They have Ricardo Hallman, who is going to be drafted at corner. Big thing here, Luke Fickell. I am not the biggest Luke Fickell guy, but he's still a good coach. Wisconsin's still a good program. Tyler Van Dyke's the quarterback from Miami. I kind of like him. I kind of don't. Like Washington, they're going to win games in the Big Ten. I have them beating Alabama. 8-4 is how I feel about them. I don't think they beat Oregon. I don't think they beat Iowa. I don't think they beat Penn State. We feel the same about Wisconsin. We both have them at 8-4. But I feel like this is going to be an explosive team. Like they're going to win games 30-28. They're going to score 40 in some games, and the defense is good enough for them. They're going to give up 14 against Minnesota or whoever. Like it's a good team. They had one of the best defenses last year. It's a tougher schedule this year. Like I said, 8-4. I feel like you could say this about a lot of Big Ten teams, but if you throw Wisconsin in like the American, they go 10-2 or 11-1. So It's just a matter of the schedule in Big Ten.
No, I agree. I agree with that. I think Wisconsin, they definitely are going to be competitive. They're going to be a good team. I do think that Wisconsin has a good chance of potentially being a 10-win team at tops if they really get competitive. But I do think 8 wins is probably their ballpark benchmark, if you will, for them. All right, now we go to the 6. We're almost to the top 5 here. I got Iowa at number 6.
Are you considering any of these teams now in playoff contention?
Iowa could be close, I would say, but their conference schedule, their conference record obviously doesn't reflect where they're at in the rank. Like I do think Iowa would be the closest right now to getting in. My top 3 will probably all get into the playoffs right now with the way they're at.
I'll tell you right now, my top 3 did make the playoffs when I did my
top 3 would.
Iowa
would get close.
I've already done all my playoffs. I've already done all my bowl games.
I have Iowa at 9-3. They're my number 6. Although in the conference, they like in real life, in regards to record, they would be the number 4 team in their overall record. But with the conference playing in, they're the number 6 team in the Big Ten. I do think that they are going to be a very competitive team. I have them beating Washington as a big win for them. They will get through their non-con schedule relatively handily. I think they'll beat Iowa State. I mean, overall, it's not a difficult schedule. I do think Iowa's going to be very good.
It's the second easiest schedule in the Big Ten
Yeah.
behind one and only Rutgers.
Their biggest travel is out to UCLA, and that's on a Friday. That's probably their toughest, but then they got a bye week the week after, so it's not too bad. They do travel out to Ohio State, probably the biggest road game they have. Overall, though, it's a really easy schedule. I think I was going to be competitive as always. They're always usually a top tier team. They're
defense.
kind of underrated. Yeah, good defense. So
I will say, besides Ohio State, no team is in the top 25 from last year. So it is easy. We both like Iowa. I have them at 9-3 as well, but I have them a bit higher, and I'll talk more about Iowa when we get there. My number 6 team is a team I'm very high on, and it is none other than the USC Trojans. So USC, I have them at 8-4. Their offense is going to be so good this year. And USC, to me, is a team that could win 10 games and make the playoffs. Their offense is so explosive. Miller Moss is a great quarterback. He's very exciting. Lincoln Riley, we all know what Lincoln Riley can do, with an offense. It's almost every year, right, that Lincoln Riley has a top 5 offense. They return a ton of that offense. The big thing with USC is that the defense is weak. They had the 110th ranked defense last year. And, there's 134 teams, I believe, in FBS. So if you're the 110th ranked defense, you're very, very bad. So almost all of USC's games are going to be, 60, 70-point total games. Their offense is going to be very, very good. It's going to be hard for teams to travel. I have them losing to LSU, which we talked about in the SEC episode, because, I make sure I keep my games that I pick the same. So I have them losing to LSU. I have them beating Michigan. I have them beating Wisconsin. I have them losing to Penn State. Then they kind of win the rest, except UCLA. At the end, I have Notre Dame actually beating them. Like USC they are must-watch television this year with their offense. You'll turn it on and like, okay, they're gonna score on this drive. Like that's what USC are. But also if they're on defense, you're like, okay, they're gonna give up a touchdown this drive. I think every single game for USC is gonna be 30-35. It's gonna be something like that. And because of that, they're going to lose games. But because of that, they're gonna win games. So I have them at 8-4. I have them they're not making the playoffs though. Like I said, I've already done all that. But they could make it. They will be ranked when the season ends.
You gave them one extra win.
Yeah.
Just gonna give you that out there because that is an extra win, not what you were saying earlier. I have USC going 7-5, although they are the number 5 team for me. As you kind of mentioned, they're going to be must-watch television. They're going to be really good. Their non-con schedule is also really fun as well with Notre Dame and LSU. Those are probably going to be some of the best matchups of the season. I do think USC, it's not going to be like last year where they were as it's going to be kind of like last year, I guess, because they weren't really that. They were, but they weren't.
No, like I said, they had a fantastic offense. They also had Caleb Williams, but Miller Moss.
They had a chance to do something special, but they couldn't get everything.
The defense. Their defense was 110th in the nation. You're not winning anything with the 110th best. They're MAC teams. They're Conference USA teams with better defenses than USC.
Yeah. Their big win is going to be against Washington, in my opinion. And that's kind of where I have them at right now. I think they do go 7-5, but I think they'll be very competitive, and they're my number 5 team.
Yeah, I said I'm very high on them. I got them at 8-4. My number 5. So we basically just swapped because I have Iowa here, which you had Iowa at 6. I like Iowa a lot. Iowa have a very easy schedule this year. I do have Iowa State beating them. I have Ohio State beating them, and I have Nebraska beating them at the end. Otherwise, any team that Iowa faces that has questions on offense, like Maryland, for example, or Northwestern, or Michigan State, if there's any team that has any sort of question on offense, Iowa is going to win that game. Iowa have the best defense in college football, in my opinion. One other interesting thing, they retained 18 of their starters, 9 of them on defense. So an already elite defense, one of the best, if not the best, and it's the same as last year besides Cooper DeJean, who's off to the NFL. One thing is Their offense is terrible. They were the 130th best offense. They were the 4th worst offense. That's impressive to be the 4th worst offense. But Cade McNamara is here this year. Maybe he's the answer at quarterback. I don't know. I still don't believe Iowa are going to score more than 20 in a game. There's going to be a lot of 17-10 Iowa games like we've seen in the past. But yeah, you just like if Iowa had a decent offense, they're like in contention to win the Big Ten every year. But it says they're absolutely terrible on offense. That's just not the case. So I got them at 9-3, same as you. And now we're into the top 4. These are definitely like right there on the playoffs or in the playoffs. And we have the same top 4 of Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State. So we kind of have that same second tier as well. That second tier is kind of Iowa, USC, Wisconsin, Washington. I threw Nebraska in there. So we're kind of the same on the tiers and our tiering. So we're into the top 4 now. My Big Ten is not the same as a lot of people's Big Ten. So I'm interested to see who you got.
My number 4 is going to be Michigan at 8-4. Michigan obviously takes a step back. They lose Jim Harbaugh. It's going to be a learning curve for this team. No J.J. McCarthy. I do think, though, Michigan will still be very competitive. I actually changed a game on their schedule. No, my bad. Different team I changed. I do think they win majority of their opening games. I do think they lose to Texas early in the year. They beat USC. They lose to Washington on the road. And then I do think they kind of run shop, although they do lose to Oregon and Ohio State. I think they lose to the teams that are going to be a lot tougher and that are kind of towards the top of the college football world and even in the Big Ten as well. So I do think Michigan will be good. They won't be returning, though, to the playoffs. I think 8-4 is kind of right outside. I think 9-3 is the kind of cut line. If you
I'm also interested to see how the committee does this year, right? So how do you value an 8-4 Michigan? And I had this same sort of issue when I made my playoff. How do you?
I just don't think their wins are as big. Like they don't have the same schedule.
Also, how do you value an 8-4 team when you look at their losses? If you have them losing to Ohio State, who you probably have in the playoffs, okay, so they're going to lose to Ohio State, who's in the playoffs. They're going to lose to Oregon, who's in the playoffs. They're going to lose to Texas, who's in the playoffs. So if your only losses are teams that are in the playoffs, how do you value that?
I don't think they would get in still.
Yeah, I understand that.
They need to win at least one of those games, I think, to be good to get in.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that I have them in the playoffs or I don't have them in the playoffs because I don't want to ruin the when we do our playoffs and bowl predictions. But like I will say, if you only lose, we've seen this in the 14 playoffs. If you only lose the teams that are in the playoffs, the committee likes that, right? That's how Alabama made it as the 4 seed because they've lost to Georgia, right? So to me, if you lose to Texas, which I have them losing to Texas, if you lose to Ohio State, if you lose to Oregon, like you're probably going, like the committee is going to pick that over a 9-win team who didn't beat anybody in the playoffs. Especially if you beat a team. I have them beating Oregon, and we'll just talk about Michigan because I have them at number 4 as well. So I have them losing to Texas. I have them beating Oregon at home because at some point, Oregon's offense isn't going to perform. They're like Oregon, it's just how it is in football. Like you're not going to score 40 points every game. Michigan have an elite defense. That's how they won the championship last year. So I think they're going to win that game in the Big House against Oregon. And like I said, I'm not going to spoil anything. But if you beat a team that's in the playoffs and you only lose the teams that were in the playoffs, like you kind of got a good resume to make it, right? Alex Orji at quarterback is not very good, in my opinion. He's a 3-star quarterback. He hasn't played a snap yet, unless you count his 1 snap that he took and ran the ball. But he's very Kyler Murray-esque. He's a dual threat quarterback. He could, do something. Donovan Edwards is a great running back. They're going to be able to run the ball well. I think Michigan are going to win every game that they're supposed to, and they're going to lose the games against the big teams. That's just how I feel about them this year. Sharon Moore, brand new head coach, right? If Jim Harbaugh had this team, you have them at 10 wins?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, we kind of feel the same about Sharon Moore.
Even if J.J. McCarthy was on this team, I have my 10 wins.
I agree. Yeah, you lose your head coach, you lose your quarterback. It's very much the UCLA for me. It's very much the the Washington. It's almost exactly like Washington for me. But now that I look back on my playoff predictions here, the team that I put in, I'm not going to say anything, but I have an interesting 11 seed. That's all I will say. So we have Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon agreed for our top three. So who's not making the Big Ten championship?
Ooh. So I have the team not making the Big Ten championship is Oregon at 10-2. They will probably make the college football playoff though with that record. I do think they will make the college football playoff with that record. Oregon is going to be—they're a good team. You mentioned Dylan Gabriel, obviously with the group. Idaho, I think they basically run roughshod through the first 5 games. They win all those games, and then they get into the Ohio State game. I do think they lose that one, even though it is at home. And I also do think they lose to Wisconsin on the road. Tough matchup on the road, heading out to Wisconsin, Cheeseland. I do think they lose that game, but Oregon's schedule, though, is pretty manageable. I do think it's going to be a fun schedule, a lot of fun matchups against like Michigan and Ohio State. Obviously, you got Wisconsin on there as well. Should be a good one. Oregon, Washington is always a good matchup. So it should be some good games, but I do think that they are a 10-2 team in my book.
Yeah, the best game of the year is Oregon, Ohio State when that comes around. There's an interesting chance as well that we see Oregon, Ohio State 3 times this year. Obviously, we'll see week 7. There's a good chance we see it in the conference championship, and then there's a chance we see it in the playoffs. So we might see Oregon, Ohio State 3 times. I have a feeling we picked the exact same Big Ten because I also have Oregon at number 3. They're in a brand new conference, and it's like I said, if you run your team off your offense isn't going to score 40 every single game. I have them losing to Ohio State and Michigan. Like I said, we just talked about Michigan. I have Michigan winning that game because of defense, right? So Dylan Gabriel comes over from Oklahoma, also, UCF, back in the day. He is one of the Heisman favorites right now. They had 530 yards a game last year. That's not going to happen again in the Big Ten. That was against Pac-12 where there's no defense. So it's brand new territory for Oregon. Obviously, Oregon are one of the best teams heading into the year. I do have them in the playoffs, just like you probably will. But the defense will let them down in some cases. They might be favored in every game except Ohio State, but they're not going to win every game. Like, it's kind of what you said about Georgia. You had Georgia going 12-0. I just don't see it. Like, Oregon are projected, 11-1. I think they lose 2 games. Like, I don't think you beat Ohio State and Michigan and Wisconsin and Washington. Like, you're going to lose. Maybe even Boise State. You could lose to Oregon State. That's a rivalry game. So, give me a 10-2 for Oregon, which means they don't make the Big Ten championship. So we both have Ohio State, Penn State in the Big Ten championship. Now, before you tell me who wins that, who do you actually have higher in the regular season standings, Ohio State or Penn State?
I got Penn State.
You had them higher?
I have Penn State at number 1 in terms of the regular season. I had them at 12-0.
12-0. Okay. So I had Ohio State at 12-0, Penn State at 11-1. So did you have Penn State winning? Do you have Penn State winning the Big Ten, or does Ohio State?
I have Ohio State beating Penn State in the Big Ten championship.
Okay, so we have the same kind of thing here.
Yes.
So Penn State 12-0. Okay. I have them 11-1, so obviously we're not far off, obviously. But I have them losing to Ohio State. I assume you have them beating Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is that Ohio State's only loss?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about that game then. So Penn State, to me, I don't fully believe in Drew Aller at quarterback, but he's very much the opposite of how you are in Madden. He does not throw interceptions. He had 2 picks last year. So you're getting a very safe quarterback out of Penn State, a very good defense, and maybe, just maybe, the most intimidating stadium in the Big Ten. But here's why I have Ohio State higher. Ohio State is just the better team. They're better coached. Chip Kelly is going to be calling plays on the offense. Will Howard and Chip Kelly, that's going to be a great combination. Also, they got Ole Miss running back Quinton Jenkins. They have Caleb Downs, who is the best safety in college football. Jack Sawyer, he's one of the best pass rushers. Ebuka is the best receiver, maybe at least top 5. Travion Henderson is one of the best running backs. They have an elite 1-2 punch, right? Teams aren't going to be able to stop the rush. They're not going to be able to stop the attack. And then they're not going to be able to stop the defense. The defense is going to be too good. I do understand why you have Penn State winning that game. I assume it's mostly because of the home field advantage. But to me, Drew Aller and that offense is not going to be able to handle Ohio State and their offense.
Yeah, I mean, that could really go either way, I think, really. I mean, that game is kind of hit or miss. I kind of did what you mentioned. I had the pick because of it being at home for Penn State. Again, I think it's going to be a challenging game for Penn State, but I do think that they win. But I do think Ohio State gets their revenge in the conference championship.
Yeah, I have Ohio State finishing 12-0, and then Penn State 11-1, and then Ohio State, winning in that. So we kind of feel the same there. To me, it just like if there's gonna be, so you have 2 12-0 teams as we're into this right now.
No, I have 1 12-0 team.
Well, you have Georgia being 12-0. So
yes.
It just seems to me like Penn State 12-0. It just doesn't feel right. But also an interesting nugget about Penn State is that the last time James Franklin replaced both his coordinators, they won the Big Ten title. That's happening this year. And they have Micah Parsons 2.0 over there, third best defense. Keegan-Michael Key, their head coach. He's not Keegan-Michael Key, but he looks like him. We both kind of agree with Penn State. It kind of like Penn State kind of just fold every year. I don't see them winning 12 games.
I mean, we'll see. I mean, they're a team that is interesting, right? Because you kind of mentioned it. They definitely are a team that may not win 12 games because sometimes they're a team that always I don't know, they just don't, fulfill their potential.
But you have them winning 12 games. You don't have any team.
I do think that this year is different, though. I think without Michigan being in the fold as much as they are, I think this year's a different season for them.
The only tough team you play is Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, you play USC on the road, but Penn State's defense is gonna, and USC doesn't have a defense.
Mm-hmm.
You play Washington at home. We're very similar on Penn State. I think it's an easier schedule, but still, like Drew Aller isn't he's not one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten, and I feel like you have to have good quarterback play, which is why I had them losing to Ohio State basically twice this year. But we're very similar. Neither one of us have Oregon in the championship game, which is interesting because Oregon are heading into the year as the second best team in the nation. So I guess we could wrap up the Big Ten. Really, some talking points. I'm higher on USC than you by a little bit. Higher on Nebraska, higher on Rutgers, a lot higher on UCLA, Mr. 2 wins over there. So those are kind of all different talking points that we can keep up with during the year. Also, every single week we're going to have a fantastic Big Ten matchup on the schedule. So,
yes, sir.
Are you gonna close it out, Mr. Host? You're just staring at the camera.
You weren't, Mr. He thinks that it's 2-game difference.
Mr. 2-10 UCLA. It's ridiculous.
It's been a great show. You didn't like pass it back to me. It wasn't very good. All right. Well, anyways, nevertheless, thank you guys for watching. We appreciate it. We'll be back with our next episode, which will be doing the Pac-12 or the Pac-2 conference.
We're not going to be doing the Pac-2.
We will either do the group of 5, or we may do
Big 12 or
Big
ACC.
10, or Big 12 or ACC. So we have 3 more to go. We'll keep you guys updated. Only a few weeks away from the start of the college football season, so we'll stay tuned and see you guys on the other side. Peace.
Also, there's a 90% chance that UCLA win more than 2 games.
All right. Bye.